Religion is the opium of the people. This famous sentence comes from Karl Marx, one of the most famous philosophers and critics of religion in history. What does Marx mean by this sentence? And what is the aim of his critique of religion? Karl Marx was a German philosopher, economist, social theorist, and journalist. He is born a Jew in Trier in 1818. Several rabbis come from his parents' families. After the Congress of Vienna, when Trier no longer belongs to France but to Prussia, the family is confronted with anti-Semitism for the first time. His father Heinrich is suddenly no longer allowed to work as a lawyer and therefore converts to Christianity and becomes a Protestant. So that Karl can attend grammar school, he is also baptized at the age of 6. A year later, his mother converts. Marx begins his studies in 1835. He makes the acquaintance of left-wing followers of the philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, the so-called Young Hegelians, and learns about Ludwig Feuerbach's critique of religion. Marx becomes an atheist. At the age of 24, he works as editor-in-chief of a liberal democratic journal in Cologne and comes into contact with the social question for the first time. There is a conflict with censorship, and the newspaper is banned by the Prussian government. In 1843, Marx leaves Germany and moves to Paris. There, he learns about the ideas of early socialism and becomes aware of the misery of the industrial proletariat. He makes friends with Friedrich Engels and, together with him, devotes himself intensively to political economy. Together, Marx and Engels develop the political concept of communism. Their Communist Manifesto is published in 1848 and remains one of the most widely read books in the world to this day. In 1867, Marx publishes the first volume of his magnum opus, Capital, a critique of political economy. Marx is expelled from France in 1845. He gives up his Prussian citizenship and remains stateless for the rest of his life. He lives in Belgium and Germany, then moves to England, where he lives until his death in 1883. Marx is regarded as one of the most influential theorists of socialism and communism, but also as a famous representative of radical atheism and a fundamental critique of religion. Marx's critique of religion is strongly influenced by Ludwig Feuerbach. He writes, "Feuerbach is our greatest prophet. There is no other way to the truth than through Feuerbach." Marx formulated his criticism of religion primarily in the introduction to his work, Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right. In it, he changes and intensifies Ludwig Feuerbach's critique of religion. The latter had described God as a projection of human desires. Marx also considers God to be a projection of man. He writes, "The foundation of irreligious criticism is, man makes religion, religion does not make man. Religion is, indeed, the self-consciousness and self-esteem of man. In God, man sees only himself in an idealized, infinitely magnified form." In contrast to Feuerbach, however, Marx does not advocate an anthropological critique of religion, but a socio-critical one. For Marx, man is not an abstract being squatting outside the world, but only exists in society. He is always integrated into a political and socio-economic context and lives in a specific social situation. His reality is shaped by economic and social factors. Thus, in Marx's view, it was not the individual but society that made religion. Social existence determines human consciousness. Religion is therefore not based solely on personal experiences and desires, as is the case with Feuerbach, but on social and political conditions. Religion is a reaction to concrete social conditions. It is a projection of society, the product of economic and social conditions. Marx also shares Feuerbach's conviction that people become alienated from themselves through religion. In contrast to Feuerbach, however, Marx considers the social reasons for this religious alienation. According to Marx, the reason why people invent God and other religious content is the inverted social world. An unjust society creates an inverted religious consciousness. Marx writes, "This state and this society produce religion, which is an inverted consciousness of the world, because they are an inverted world." For Marx, religious consciousness is therefore alienated consciousness in an alienated world. In this world, it is not the individual believer who invents his or her own religion, but society. According to Marx, religion can therefore only be understood if we understand its role within society. For Marx, all pre-communist societies are class societies. So the question is, what role does religion play within the system of class society? For Marx, the answer is quite clear. Religion conceals the misery of real conditions, legitimizes them retrospectively, and supports the existing power relations. In this way, it primarily benefits the ruling class. Religion, for example, glorifies unjust property relations as God's will, or consoles believers for a better hereafter, provided they accept their poor living conditions in this world. But this is not a deliberate deception. Religion is quite simply the product of a certain social order. Nobody has to consciously invent it or misuse it for their own purposes. Priests and capitalists themselves do not see through the fact that religion is actually a mere construct that only serves to support a social order from which they profit. According to Marx, the religious illusion affects the whole of society, including the ruling class. Consequently, the solution that Marx proposes is also different from Feuerbach's. While Feuerbach advocates radical humanism and personal commitment, Marx argues that religious alienation can only be overcome through social revolution. He is convinced that a profound social and political change is necessary, more precisely the transition to a socialist and later communist society. In his opinion, religion prevents this necessary change, as it distracts people from the real misery and puts them off to a better life in the hereafter. In Marx's view, religion would become superfluous and die out under the changed, better, economic and social conditions. Marx's main criticism of Feuerbach was that his teachings remained purely theoretical and far too abstract. At the end of his 11 Theses on Feuerbach, he writes, "Philosophers have only interpreted the world differently, but it is important to change it." And why does Marx call religion the opium of the people? Marx writes, "Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, as it is the spirit of spiritless conditions. It is the opium of the people." This quote refers to the miserable conditions mentioned before, which Marx wants to change. He is primarily focusing on the workers, the proletariat, who live in misery and in complete dependence on the factory owners, the capitalists, as a result of industrialization and rural exodus. Opium is a highly sedative, pain-relieving drug that millions of people around the world were addicted to, especially in the 19th century. In the first picture, you can see a drawing of a so-called opium den from the 19th century. In the second picture, a photo of an opium den from the 20th century. People smoked opium there to get intoxicated. However, opium was and is also used in medicine as an anesthetic and painkiller. Just like opium, religion also acts as a sedative and anesthetic that provides illusory rather than real happiness. It distracts people from the misery in this world and puts them off to a better life in the hereafter. In this way, it compensates for this misery. Religion thus contributes to supporting the existing conditions and prevents the emancipation of the oppressed. According to Marx, people deceive themselves with religion. Lenin also uses the phrase, opium of the people. However, he actually understood opium as opium for the people. In his view, religion deliberately anesthetizes the people. He propagates a militant atheism, which already led to the closure of churches in Russia under Lenin and then to numerous demolitions under Stalin. Marx, on the other hand, is concerned with freedom and self-determination. He does not want to ban religion, but rather that it becomes superfluous, that its opium-like effect is no longer necessary. He writes, "The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is the demand for their real happiness. To call on them to give up their illusions about their condition is to call on them to give up a condition that requires illusions." For Marx, religion is an ideological superstructure. It grows on the soil of social misery and is at the same time a protest against this misery. He writes, "Religious misery is in one sense the expression of real misery, and in another the protest against real misery." Religion is therefore ambivalent, has a dual character. It reinforces existing social grievances by justifying them and consoles people for the grievances in their lives with expected rewards in the kingdom of heaven. It is the consolation and justification of a heartless world. On the other hand, it formulates an ideal image of the world that stands in sharp contrast to reality and thus challenges people. It is a protest against inhuman social conditions. But this protest by religion remains ineffective and powerless. This is because religion distracts people from the real world and the necessary changes by putting them off to a better world in the hereafter. It acts as opium, as a sedative and anesthetic. As a result, religion prevents people from being prepared to emancipate themselves and to rebel against real grievances. For Marx, criticism of religion is therefore the prerequisite for a real revolutionary change in society. Marx wants to change the individual, the environment, and society with his critique of religion. For such a change to be possible, religion must be viewed critically. In Marx's view, religion will die out in a changed, improved world, as it will no longer be needed as a means of consolation. According to Marx, man must give up religion, his opium, as it obscures his true view of actual misery. But it would make no sense to just take away man's opium, but leave the conditions unchanged that make this comforting and anesthetic necessary. For Marx, the fight against religion is at the same time the fight against a world that needs religion. Social grievances and the alienation caused by capitalism must be combated. But what exactly happens when man gives up religion? At the beginning, he is disappointed and suffers. He now clearly sees the real social and political grievances. He recognizes the misery and alienation in which he lives. Now he must overcome his disappointment, use his reason, and abolish the grievances responsible for his suffering. According to Marx, just as for Feuerbach, man himself is the highest being for man. The critique of religion ends with the doctrine that man is the highest being for man. Man must therefore overthrow all conditions in which he is a humiliated and enslaved being. In order for people to no longer be alienated from themselves and others, a change in the relations of production is needed. That is, the abolition of the division of labor and private property. The ultimate goal of the social and political change sought by Marx, and thus also of his critique of religion, is communism. Marx's critique of religion can also be criticized. Like Feuerbach, Marx also only focuses on the Christianity of his time. He also overestimates the importance of the material and economic foundations for determining the nature of human beings. Changed socio-economic conditions, as Marx wished, did not have the effect he predicted. Religions did not die of their own accord in the USSR, the GDR, or China, for example. Marx also overlooks the fact that not all human problems can be traced back to social deficits, or more precisely, to the self-alienation caused by capitalism. Experiences of illness, failure, and death also shape people and make them seek solace in religion. Furthermore, contrary to Marx's thesis, belief in God can also have a revolutionary force. Religious people are often actively involved in socio-political issues and fight for social and political change precisely because of their faith. The last point of criticism relates to Marx's worldview. In his view, religion becomes superfluous in a classless society. According to Marx, such a classless society already existed at the beginning of human history. Today, however, it is strongly assumed in religious studies that religious cult forms have existed at all times, even in prehistoric times. In all communist states, starting with Marx, religion is still suppressed today. Believers are persecuted or practice their faith underground. Is this justified in your opinion? And, from today's perspective, can you understand why Marx considered religion to be the opium of the people? Feel free to write your opinion in the comments below.